Hi everyone. Well, I've been looking at my own videos on this channel, and man, that one with me talking about Charles Dickens, I think all that needs is a little, slow violin music playing long, drawn out notes, and then slowly a children's musical box starts playing a lullaby, and you start hearing weird echoey sounds. Oh yeah, and then when I get home, you see my room, and there's a giant mind map of newspaper clippings all over my wall, saying things like Nurkish, Douglas Ernst, jet fuel can't melt steel beams, moral relativism, SJW Marvel, Three Musketeers, and then I move over to my closet and slowly open up the door, and there's my boy Zach, tied up, and he's got a Marmaduke hat on. Anyway, so I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe I know I'm kind of like shooting these out, really fast whenever the idea strikes me, but it's a little weird, and I know it's a little weird, but bear with me, and for now, I'm just going to keep shooting these out until I get the ideas done, and then I'll kind of like improve the quality of video production so I'm not walking down a dark street at night pointing at the ground. So anyway, this morning I tried to talk about moral relativism while making bacon, and that video failed a little bit due to my phone. I think I finally got it, but I was cut off when I was talking about Douglas Ernst and Nurkish talking about moral relativism in comics, and is the Three Musketeers moral relativists? And I got cut off right when I was saying the argument against moral relativism is really simple. Someone comes up to you and says, these ideas of good and evil, they're not really objective. Everything is subjective. Everything is culturally determined. No statements about what's good and what's true are absolute. And the refutation of that argument is that an absolute statement? Is that a universal statement? So the point I was trying to make was that very few people walk around saying, I am a moral relativist. There are examples of people who commit to that as something that they think is true. I don't know. You see what I'm talking about? How's it true? But I think most people know that argument against moral relativism, but just what we end up doing a bit naturally is we will make moral relativist arguments when convenient. By the way, we're looking at Betty and Veronica Double Digest, not because I'm going to read it, but because I didn't want to point at a black table, so we've got this to look at, I guess. We could talk about Archie Comics and how good a job they do of introducing kids to comics in the future, but my boy Zach's already talked about that. Well, don't go on a tangent. So, tangents, stream of consciousness, what I want to do with this channel. So, I think it's come across in every video that I'm passionate about the things I'm talking about. I have a general idea of what I want to talk about, but there are lots of little sidebars that I see as relevant to this problem of social justice in comics and video games. And I just kind of want to, the real reason I want to make this one is maybe to clarify a few things and get a few things off my chest so that when I do a real comic review, I won't accidentally start talking about these topics. So this is general, everything that's miscellaneous that's on my mind, get it all out so I can be a bit more focused on actual comic reviews later. So I mentioned in my very first video talking about that Zelda manga that I had examples of comics with beautiful stories involving heroic female characters where they are legitimately human beings with human emotions and human personality. And I have, the comic I have in mind is called Zita the Space Girl by Ben Hatke. And before I review it, I want to talk about why I was kind of so hesitant to make a YouTube channel in the first place and why I've got to do it now. So I first read Zita the Space Girl at a very difficult time in my art career where I had a lot of self-doubt about my own artistic practice, and the beauty of Ben Hatke's imagination and his comic and his ideas really inspired me personally, and he's a great guy. But for years I thought about that comic as an example of the philosophical problems that feminism presents to artists and storytellers, because essentially everything I said about the Zelda manga in my very first video is also true of Zeta the Space Girl. It's an Ivanhoe story with human emotion, human passion, human soul about young people with real emotions and personality who care about each other and who go through difficulty to help one another. In this instance, it's a girl character taking what's traditionally the young boy character's role. But she's not merely a distaff character. Anidia Sarkeesian calls them Miss Male Character, a male character with all male attributes where the only thing is, a pink ribbon. She said boobs, but that wouldn't work in this case because we're talking about young kids. So I'll say a Miss Male Character would have a little pink bow in her hair, and that's the only thing that distinguishes her as a girl. This is not true of Zeta the Space Girl because Zeta actually is she is a tomboyish girl, but she is a girl who actually behaves like a girl and acts like a girl and thinks like a girl. And the adventure is all about her growing morally and growing heroically. And she already has these qualities within herself, but the amazing circumstances of her adventure in space bring this out of her. So it's one of my absolute favorite examples of comics of all time. And I was hesitant to talk about it because of my attitudes about how politics should be kept out of art. And it felt like a disservice to the artist. So, I'm not going to tweet this at Ben Hatke because I'm almost a little embarrassed about the quality of these videos. But if Ben Hatke ever saw me talking about his comic, this would really be weird, right? Like, first I'm talking about his comic, and then I'm talking about SJW comics and social justice and philosophy. It's really weird, and if I have any fellow art student bros and sisters out there, you probably had the experience of where you made a work of art and then you brought it into critique, and then someone says, oh, this work of art, it really reminds me of the political situation in Cambodia. You're thinking, wow, that's a really interesting addition there. Thank you. I'll have to check that out. I really wasn't thinking about the political situation in Cambodia when I made this painting, but I appreciate the input, right? It's a little weird to take one thing and then bring all of this philosophy and politics out of it. So the first video was important to me, the one about the Zelda manga, because the connection I made partially was that social justice is an interesting thing to talk about. Comics are an interesting thing to talk about. They're obviously relevant to one another when we're talking about Marvel Comics bringing social justice politics into their works in a blatant way, in a deliberate way. But it still feels awkward to talk about politics and philosophy when we're talking about comics. And the reason that first video was important was I think I connected personally that something I loved, the romantic heroic story, the Legend of Zelda story, was in direct opposition in terms of worldview to the intersectional feminist philosophy of history and society. That intersectional feminism and the morality of Ivanhoe and of the romantic heroic story will always come into conflict with one another, because stories about heroes imply that there's such a thing as heroism. Stories about doing the right thing imply that there's such a thing as right and wrong. And if you have a confused idea about what right and wrong is, or if you have completely opposite views of what right and wrong is to someone else, you're going to end up telling different stories. And stories for young people, simple stories for the masses, Star Wars, comic books, romantic tales of knights or pirates. These are supposed to be very universal stories that people of multiple political persuasions and religious beliefs and ideas and countries can enjoy because they see the universal ideas of good and evil in them. And once there is division within a culture about what good and evil is, that's eventually going to have it out in the stories that we tell our children or that we give to the masses. Very, very, very few people are going to go read Friedrich Nietzsche compared to the number of people who will read a comic book that might express, he gets described as a nihilist. He was a nihilist who is trying to overcome the problem of nihilism through the idea of the Übermensch, or sheer force of will. So it's not fair to say that Nietzsche kind of encouraged people to just be pessimistic and nihilistic all the time. He was trying to overcome the problem that without God, how do you not inevitably sink into nihilism and depression. And it's a big question for the 20th century. Still going with this stream of consciousness until I get everything out.